All right, this is the notes for Chapter 7, Section 3. That should be your heading at the top. Chapter 7, Section 3. So there's some objectives for this section. We've got some key terms, words, and their definitions. Here is the answer to the focus question that we discussed today. What role does money play in electoral politics? We talked about campaign spending. We talked about fundraising, and we talked about regulation. And that is what we're going to go straight into. All right, so your next heading will be campaign spending. That's the first way that money plays a role in electoral politics. So in 2008, presidential candidates spent some $2.5 billion. So that was in 2008. So in 2008, presidential candidates spent some $2.5 billion. We can probably be sure that now they're spending more than that. This was when John McCain and Barack Obama were running against each other. And this shows us a little bit about how they spent the money. So it talks about in September alone, Obama and McCain each spent an average of $25.2 million on TV and radio ads, $4.1 million on travel, $2 million on campaign worker salaries, and $800,000 on polls. So that shows you where that $2.5 billion went. So again, just campaign spending continued. So for the House and Senate races, $1.5 billion was spent on House and Senate contests, or we would call those races, in 2008. It now costs about $1 million to run for a House seat and up to 20 times that to campaign for a Senate seat. So over here in this graph, you can see total campaign spending from 1964 to 2008. So the estimated spending in 1964 was $200 million. Voter turnout, 70.6 million. Spending per voter, $2.83. So you can see as you go down the line that progressively has gotten more and more and more as the year's presidential elections have went on. So where 2008 is the most recent data they have at 7.0 billion. But you can see the voter turnout in 1964 was 70.6 million. Well, the voter turnout in 2008 was 127.5 million. So not only are they spending more money, there are more people turning out to vote. And then the average spending per voter, like if they donate money to campaigns in 2008, was $54.90. So you can see as the years went on, that gradually went up as well. All right, so our next heading is the sources of the funding. So where does this money that they use come from? And that's your checkpoint. Where do campaign contributions come from? So your next heading, sources of funding. So where does this money come from that they use? Most money comes from private givers, private donators, such as small contributors, wealthy individuals, political action committees, also known as PACs, temporary fundraising groups, and the candidates themselves give some of their own money to their campaign. Campaigns, particularly presidential campaigns, receive public funds from federal and state treasuries as well. So campaigns receive public funds from federal and state treasuries as well. So sources of funding continued, no new heading. The internet has become a major fundraising tool, particularly for outsider candidates. So really, we're just going to say the internet has become a major fundraising tool. For instance, in 2008, Barack Obama raised some $230 million via the internet in 2008. Mostly in the sums of less than $100. So that means that the people on the internet who were donating to him were donating $100 or less. And through that, he was able to raise $230 million. So sources of funding continued, no new headings. So candidates also raise money through telethons and fundraising dinners. People typically give money because they believe in a party candidate. Okay, so why do they give the money? They believe in a party or candidate, or they donate because they wish to influence public policy. They want to have something to say, I donated all this money to you, so I want to have a say in some kind of policy. Or they want improved access to the government. All right, so our next heading is the third way that money plays a role in electoral politics is regulating finance. So there are rules to the way that you can get money and the way you can spend money when you're running in the electoral process. So Congress regulates the use of money in federal elections. It passed the most recent campaign finance law in 2002. So federal laws require the disclosure of campaign finances. They limit contributions and expenditures. So expenditures just means how they're using the money, what they're spending it on, and provide federal funding for presidential elections. The Federal Election Commission, which is one of our key terms, often struggles to enforce campaign finance laws due to a lack of staff and funds. So it's hard to say exactly if all the candidates are following the rules because the Federal Election Commission struggles to enforce it due to the lack of staff and the lack of money to do it. So there are limits on the Federal Election Committee, which is the FEC. So that's your new heading, limits on the FEC. Again, FEC is the Federal Election Committee. So the limits that they have is that they're understaffed and underfunded. It only consists of 6 people, usually 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. There's a conflict of interest. There's loopholes. All right, so your next heading is disclosure requirements. So disclosure means telling what you're doing with the money. So each candidate has a single committee responsible for all campaign spending and recording all campaign contributions. So each candidate has a single committee responsible for all campaign spending and recording all campaign contributions, which just means donations. If you have donations that are over $200, it must be identified by date, the purpose, and the name of the giver. If somebody donates more than $5,000, it must be reported to the Federal Election Commission. The candidate must report that. Another rule is that cash gifts of more than 100 are prohibited. So cash gifts of more than 100 are prohibited as contributions and spending from foreign sources. So you cannot get cash more than $100. So that's the disclosure, the telling on contributions. And then these are the limits on the actual contributions or the donations. So limits on contributions. Remember, contributions are donations. So no person can give over $2,300 to a federal candidate in a primary or general election. No person can give more than $5,000 to a political action committee or a PAC. They also can't give more than $28,500 in a single year. No person can give more than $108,200 total in a 2-year election cycle. So in 2 years, one person can only donate up to $108,200. I don't know who has that kind of money to donate to presidential campaigns. So the reason that these rules came about is because in 1974, individuals often gave larger amounts than that. So that's why they had to end up setting a limit on that. So next is the Political Action Committee contributions. So PAC contributions. There are more than 4,000 political action committees or PACs that are active today. Most represent special interest groups such as business associations or labor unions. They can raise money only from members. So raise money only from members. Other PACs are unconnected committees that can raise money from the public. So if it's not a special interest group, there are PACs that are unconnected to committees that can raise money from the public. But there's limits on what the PACs can do. Just as an individual can't spend certain amounts, the PAC has rules as well, the political action committees. So no PAC, no political action committee can give more than $5,000 to a candidate in a primary or general election. But a PAC can give to as many candidates as it chooses and give up to $15,000 a year to a political party. So they can give up to $15,000 a year to just a political party, but only $5,000 to a particular candidate. So next, your next heading is super PACs, so super political action committees. Super PACs were created by 2 court decisions. Those are Citizens United versus the Federal Election Committee in 2010. The Supreme Court ruled that limitations could not be imposed on unions and corporations who are contributing to independent political organizations. So that the Supreme Court ruled that limitations could not be imposed. So that is how their super PACs came about, based on Supreme Court rulings. The other one was, well, I'm having a malfunction, sorry. The other Supreme Court ruling, SpeechNow.org versus the Federal Election Committee. A federal court of appeals ruled that PACs did not make contributions to candidates, parties, or other PACs could accept unlimited contributions from individuals, unions, and corporations.